Welcome to another episode of Parenting Not What You Thought podcast, where we delve into the depths of parenting in ways that you might never have thought of before. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. Hello and welcome. We have here with us today Mrs. Simi Mandelbaum, who is a certified financial therapist and an accredited financial counselor and a financial behavior specialist. If that was hard for you to follow, don't worry, it was hard for me also. Welcome, Mrs. Mandelbaum. Would you be able to please tell our listeners a little bit about what you do?
Thank you so much. As a financial behavior specialist, I recognize money mindsets, money personalities, how they impact your behavior with money, like how you interact, how you earn, save, and spend money. As a financial counselor, my specialty is recognizing how to deal with debt, lower income, different programs. And as a certified financial therapist, we really understand the triggers that may come when it comes to money. So a financial advisor will tell you where to put the money. We will work with helping you know how much money you feel comfortable with before you put it away. So we're the step before that.
Got it. That's very interesting. I actually like that very much because I deal with behaviors and the reasons for people's behaviors all the time. So it makes a lot of sense to me that instead of just saying, do this or don't do that, we're going to get into what's actually going on inside the person that's going to influence those behaviors in order to get them in a good place. So I really like that. Let me ask you like this. Our listeners are mostly young parents. Usually at that point in time, financially, they're hopefully still doing okay. But what they don't realize is that as time progresses, Mirza Hashem, the family grows and things move on, the finances will move along in a way that they may have never anticipated. So, what are good things that, proactive is always better than reactive? What are good even mindsets? I mean, I'm very focused on mindsets. I love it if you're going to be able to give us over some mindsets that will help us financially. What are good mindsets? What are good strategies that the couple can use together to try to help themselves now for the future?
I appreciate that question. I appreciate your audience. You are all in a beautiful time of your life. So many people will go through life even at a later date and never have had good financial conversations together with their spouse. So really starting to learn about the way your husband, wife sees money will start helping you make decisions for the future. Because sometimes we think like, we all see it the same way, or everyone knows it makes sense to put money away. So why is he not putting it away? Or why am I spending a lot? So really having money conversations is the first thing to do.
Can you walk us through a typical conversation like that? I'm going to sit down, whether we have a good relationship, we talk about all the things that are hard to discuss, and we know how to talk about them. How do we start this money conversation? What are we asking? What are some good points to bring up? Good questions to ask?
So there are two types of money conversations. Money conversation A is like, okay, these are the bills. What are we doing? How much money do we have left? What do we want to do? That is the practical, typical conversation that people think having money conversations means. No, we want to take it away. We want to take it almost like theoretical. Like imagine we were successful or we're looking at 5 years down or 10 years down. What would we be proud to say we accomplished with our money? Be it in a spiritual way, be it in a concrete way. Like what are we aiming for? And so I always say, like, wherever your head is, wherever your eye is looking, that's where you're going to work. So if my focus is like right here, how do we manage? How do we pay these bills? I'm not moving forward. I'm just focusing on today. I want you to start thinking bigger. What this also helps, this theoretical conversation, it also helps because there's no triggers yet. Like we're not discussing something that we have these triggers that all of a sudden like jump in and say, oh my goodness, they're so irresponsible, or I don't understand what they're thinking. So a regular conversation would sound something like, I was thinking maybe the kids, maybe we should start asking someone how much money to put away. And then the other one says, yeah, especially I got this bonus from work. So yeah, for sure we should do that. But like first, we really worked hard. We should probably go away on a vacation. Like we should spend some time together. And the other one's like, but like, don't, and they don't know how and what is going on to facilitate a comfortable conversation. So
Mm.
talking about money theoretically and seeing like what it is you want to do will help them start being curious. By the way, favorite word, C, curious about how it works for that person. So if they say something that's really sounds very odd, then the conversation would be something like, yeah, so I think when in 5 years, we should buy a house. We could buy $1 million house. It's going to be beautiful. We're going to be comfortable. You could have cleaning help, all the help you want. And she's like, oh, to me, like, you would be still maybe learning most of the time and maybe just working part-time, and I would still be doing my job, but we would be having some savings put away, and like the house is not as important, right? So now we can be curious, like, I'm curious why a big house is so important, or what's, and so we start having these conversations, and sometimes the person who says it, very often our words really just they come from habit. They just come out.
Wow.
We think that's the right thing.
So we're really getting much more than the finances. We're really getting to what is your ideals, what do you value in life, what means so much to you. So you're really opening up a conversation between the couple that should be helpful in every area of life, not just in the financial area. But this is amazing. I love what you said, that we're going to think bigger, we're going to think theoretical, we're going to set our goals for the future, and then I'm assuming we're going to pull that back down to the here and now. So we're not just talking budgets, right?
Exactly. So once I know what I really want for my money, it's almost like it gives me clarity about my spending today. Because, like, oh, I'm super clear. We want to have a studio that we could have guitar lessons, or an art studio. I don't know what it is for you. And that's really my goal, because I want to be self sufficient. But right now I have to work for someone else. I don't know. I'm giving an example. So now we know, like, whenever we're spending, we're like, 1 second, we want to make sure that bucket of what we really want is happening, and it becomes so much easier. It's so much clearer. I go to the grocery and I'm like, oh, okay, I can have all those extra cakes that I want. I can also take that extra $50 and put it away to something I really want. When we're not clear, we just work out of habit. We work out of not intentional decisions, emotional decisions. Money, 90% emotional, only 10% logical. I know you all think it's a spreadsheet. 1 + 1 = 2. 90% emotional. That's what it is, how we deal with money.
Because the question is, where are you putting that one, in which column? And that will be based on the emotion. That won't be based on on any facts.
Yeah.
And that makes a lot of sense. I have that in my world also, where very often people will say a child did this, right? Did they really do that? Well, it's really based on your preconceived notion, your assumption of what they're doing, which all goes back to your mindset and to your emotional makeup on your own. So a person is a person, and that comes out everywhere. Okay, we have this conversation and we go through our goals, and now we're bringing that back down to here because we're figuring out what we want in life, what we value. What happened when the two sides don't coincide? I mean, they were having a great relationship till now. They're married 7, 8 years. Everything seems fine, and all of a sudden we realize that we're out of sync.
Yeah. Yeah. And 77% of Americans feel the same way. In their relationship, 77% of Americans say money is the number one source of stress. So very often, what do? We don't talk about it, because then it's not stressful. And really, that's not a good, helpful way. So we're going to go back to our money belief. What is a money belief? We all have this money script or money belief in our head. And it's the subconscious in our minds that we're not aware is going at all times. This subconscious comes, and this money belief comes from our experience, from our community, from our upbringing, from the people we surround ourselves with. And slowly we collect data, and in the back of our heads, and we start seeing the world like, this is how I think is a good way to live with money. We don't even realize. But when we do that, we suddenly feel like that is the right way to live. We all have that experience, but we all think that ours is the right way. So I like to explain it in the way of a computer. Like, very often you open a computer, and some people you have to press Control-Shift-X to get to a software, and someone else you have to press Enter key and FN. I don't know. But if I were to tell you that the only way to open the software is this way, but your computer runs on a different software, it wouldn't work. It doesn't work. So the first thing is recognizing that the big picture, that value picture that we have now connected and said, yes, it would be so nice if we have savings for the kids, an apartment, and nurses. I don't know what it is for you. Now, how do we take those steps to get there? I first, in order to get that understanding, I need to understand what works for you, how life works for you, how money works for you, so that it can be in sync with you. So if your personality, for example, is it's important for you to be able to spend money easily, then I need to know that in order for us to have a plan that I want to have enough for savings and you want to have easy spending money, we need to create maybe a separate amount of money that's just your fun money. We don't question it. That's what we together decide. And that means you feel good, you have your extra. I feel good, we're putting it away. So the only way we could do that is if we're understanding and we clarify what it is the other person needs.
So you're basically saying something very simple, is that when we're not in sync, what we need to do is we need to realize that the other person's values are valuable to them and therefore to us. It doesn't mean that we need to give up on our values. It just means that we need to not insist that it's our way is for sure the right way. We're going to sit down, we have this plan for the future, and now we realize that the husband's into this and the wife is into that, and we allocate for both of those things. That's more or less what you're saying?
Yeah, so just to give examples, because I know sometimes these all sound so theoretical and people are like, I don't know what she means. So I know for myself, I'm in a second marriage. So I consider myself, well, I just had decade with Shayna, so that's 10 years. But in that first year when it was, and that's when I went into this industry because I recognized the importance of financial psychology, behaviors, and finances. Like it didn't work for me. I was like, well, he is ridiculous. I love him, but I don't know, money and him just don't match. And so I thought I was really getting this right. But when I realized that for him, maybe buying diet soda in the store at a gas station that's triple the price, then I could put it in a nice big cold place for him. That made him feel like I was getting a manicure for me, right? When I understood that, suddenly it just the energy, the frustration energy just sapped out. So I didn't necessarily agree, but now it was like, oh wow, interesting. Wow, I never thought of it like that. Okay, so that makes sense. So how about we do? And then he was like, oh, once he heard I understood him, he was so much softer. He was like, wow, that's really ridiculous. I'm spending so much. Something happens. Like literally, it shifts. When someone feels heard and understood, it shifts. And the woof of that energy of what is principle, like this is how I do it, it just eases and there becomes a softness around it. And now we're more in cahoots. Now we're more in sync and more in line to say, okay, now can we sit down? There's a component of financial literacy. We actually have to work on these numbers. Like this is all wonderful in theory, but like what's
Right.
going on in our numbers?
Hey, so I'm loving this because I knew that you are whatever the exact terms are, but a financial therapist in a way, and now I'm seeing how we're really getting into the understanding of people, which these are things that we use all over the place, and to bring them into the money arena is something that I never thought was doable. I thought, like you said at the beginning, that it's just a spreadsheet. So that's a great thing. Okay, so we're a young couple. I'm going back to my story here. We had this conversation. We figured out that we're not in sync. We worked it out anyway because we have a good relationship, and now we're, I guess, on a good path. We never have to talk about it again. Everything's fine and dandy. We did the work, right?
Right, that's exactly how communication works. Like you do it once and you're good for the rest of your life. Whoever had that communication manual, I'd love it because never heard of it.
Yeah.
So this is something I really like to say weekly or at least monthly to have the theoretical conversation because as we evolve, as we get older, our values shift. What seems so important to us when we have one kid or no kids suddenly shifts when we have three or four, suddenly shifts when we're in a different age bracket and we're seeing life differently. I also love when people, if possible, I don't know what style you are out there, but if you're a style that doesn't connect with numbers, because honestly, our brain doesn't recognize numbers and letters, but it recognizes pictures. That's why even certain accounts, Ally Bank specifically, created accounts that you could actually put a picture of like your kid for their savings account or the college so that it will be harder for you to pull out the money because your brain will remember, oh, that's what my savings are there for. So if it's possible, draw the picture together. Like you draw yours, he draws his, and then talk about like merging, blending, meshing this picture of what it is you want to do for this next month. You have the long-term picture. Oh, what is our next step for this month? Come back in a month. How's it looking? Put stickers on it. Hang it in the back of your closet. Look at it. Studies show our subconscious will start working with our consciousness when we have established pictures in our brain. It will remember it and it will start changing your behavior.
And this is more for the short term, month by month. Now we have our big picture, and we're making this very, very practical. We took the theoretical and we're making it very practical on a month by month basis. And you're saying draw that picture in order to really make it go into your mind and into your brain in a very tangible way, in a way that is going to be something that I'm actually going to use and actually going to do.
And I'd love this to be done. Put on the music, have some chocolate, light some candles. This is your date night. I don't know what you want to make it. And you can even have stickers, have crayons, markers, whatever floats your boat. The more you put this energy into it, the more it becomes more a part of you. And what your kids will see is a sense of ease. What your kids will feel is like, oh, it's interesting, because it will come out. The way we deal with our money comes out in our children all the
Okay.
time.
So
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about that because let's take it to the next step. There's always that question of how much do I share, how much do I not share? Do I tell my children, I'm sorry, we're not getting that because it's expensive? There's two ways to do that. There's a way to do it in a financial prudent way, and there's a way to do it because I can't afford it. What am I supposed to do? But what do you feel about the parents sharing with the children from a financial aspect?
So let's take a step back. When someone feels like I can't afford, we call that there's feeling poor, there's being broke. Feeling poor is a mindset. I feel like I can't, that's a mindset. I can't pay the bills, I'm broke, right? And so when I'm in that place, generally what's happening in my head is I have stress. I'm stressed out now. There's anxiety, there's stress. We know, studies show us that when we're in stress, our logical part of our brain in the fMRI, which is a functional MRI, shows it's black. It's like stroke. We can't access our logic. So we become emotionally driven. So if a kid comes home and says, "Ooh, I need to have the new sneakers that someone has," and da 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 da, and also we're like on high alert, like there's red flashing, and either we just lash out because we're frustrated and we don't want to talk about the money, or we say, "That's stupid, that's silly, you don't need it," or in something like that, as opposed to if I had this conversation with my spouse or with myself, like what would we do if we were stressed? How would we handle it? It would come more out of a value perspective. And studies will show that children that have grown up with value perspective financial raising, which sounds something like, that's interesting, tell me more. We're not certain that that isn't aligned with our what we think, or maybe you can earn it doing something else so that it's not associated with we can't afford it, grow up healthier. Children that grow up hearing, nope, we can't afford it. If we could afford it, we would get it, or maybe next time, and blah, blah, blah. They believe that money is the answer to everything. And they grow up saying, we need to make money because now we could spend it because we didn't have those opportunities when we were younger. So back to our values.
Anything that a child will feel he's deprived of, he's going to be looking for. I had on here Mrs. Schatzman. She's a nutritionist, and she was saying you cannot deny the children all sugars and all sweets. They're going to go running after it in somebody else's house if you're going to do that. And what I really loved about this also, of what you just said, is because this type of mindset of the way I feel, and that's going to go over to my children, is literally what I do with the parents that I work with. I mean, it's on my logo even that we're reframing our mindset. That's what I do, because this idea of when the child comes in and says, "I need this," and you're immediately in reactionary mode. Besides for the money aspect of it, is the fact that you believe that when your child says, "I need this," means that there's a pressure on you to get this. So that's a two-step thing. That's not the same thing. And that has to do with your mindset and the way that you view your children as when they say something that like actually means something. Instead of the fact that you're the parent and you're in charge and you could hear, sometimes you're going to want to get it for them and sometimes you're not. And I'm not even talking the financial aspect here. So that ties in very, very nicely. That's why I really, really like that. In a way of giving it over to them, we're going to want to make sure to stay in a healthy mindset that it's a proper decision and not just a reaction. When I had that conversation, the ideas are in my head before. It's not about no money, no get. But it's more about like let's talk about a thing. Again, I'm gonna go back to what you said before. It's not about what I do have the money for, I don't have the money for it, because it's usually about a value system. Even someone who has no money is spending money on something. their list of priorities is just going to be different because it has to be more constrained. So then again, it's going to be a decision of where does this sit in your list of priorities, which when you are able to think about that beforehand, you have that coming out instead of just a reaction.
Or even if you don't think of it beforehand, right? Like just give yourself that time out,
Mm.
because we know that the way to process it is just giving it, like trying to say, let me think about that, as opposed to being reactive would be helpful. And I love what you just said, because what you just mentioned is the values, like how we're spending our money. We're all spending it. We're just spending it different ways. I love saying, like, I could have three couples earning the same 100,000, living on the same block, same amount of children, pretty much the same type of position, and all their expenses are in different places. One might be having debt, one might be having savings, and one might be just making it. And so I always say, you show me your money and I'll tell you your values. And so many people are like, hey, that's not a value of mine. I don't get it. But that might be just a habit. So that's where we start reflecting about habits and values. That would be
Right.
step one. And when you talk about raising kids, I love that you should start giving them money, or they should have access to learning how to manage money from a very young age. And you will see your kids have their own financial tendencies from way early. Like some of them are super frugal and they want to save all their money, and some of them don't want to save any money and just want to spend it all. And so learning them to divide all their money in three, any Hanukkah geld, this is great now before Hanukkah, some for now, some for later, some for someone else, teaches them the value of giving to someone, of having that delayed gratification and having something now, giving them that sense, because that skill set is amazing for the rest of our life. So often that's where we're caught up in. We're caught up in the like instant reaction, instant satisfaction, which gets us into trouble.
So the three categories were some for now, some for later, and
Some for someone else.
that would be like, let's say, tzedakah, ma'aser, like that type of thing.
Yeah, but and in children, I actually like them to purchase something for someone else so that they feel the money going to someone else. They see it, they experience it. Back to that experience, that's what stays in our bodies. That experience, let them get that high from being generous. Let them learn what it is about money that we can be a good steward
That's
of
such a
what
good
we have.
idea. I have, it's funny, my children very often on a sibling's birthday, they'll go out and, either take something from what they have or buy a small, thing for that sibling, which I think is great. It was a thing on their own. But that goes back to what you're saying of having that joy of being able to share and being able to give. So you answered my next question without me answering it, which was a way of how do we instill in our children healthy financial habits. You're saying to give them money and then you'll be able to see what their nature is. How do you, let's say they spend a lot and you said divide it into three envelopes. How do you give them that, like the conversations that the parents are having and, we don't want to see my money. Children's minds might not be that developed that they're going to be able to see that bigger picture, see that future. It's much more that when I get them into a habit of doing something properly, then it becomes easier for them, and it'll be very often they'll keep up that habit. So, what would be your suggestion in how to get them a child that will naturally let they spend a lot, not be so frugal, or a child that's too frugal, to be able to get them into a healthy habit financially?
First of all, we don't have to be the ones giving our kids money. It could be coming from an outside source. So don't think out there that I'm telling you all, open up your wallets and start giving your kids money. However kids access money, it is helpful if they can have access to it to learn the value of it. As far as working with kids and different personalities, that goes back to every type of personality. So I recognize that my frugal kids, I need to teach them to spend more. So I'm always telling them, like, ooh, treat yourself. And it's interesting because those frugal kids, when you want to teach them value of money, you may say, okay, why don't we split that? I think that's a good idea for you to get. How about we split that? And then suddenly they don't need it, right? And then they're like, hmm. Now that generous kid, it will be interesting to see that, because that generous kid may not even want some for later. I just want it all now. And we have to recognize we do have certain DNAs, and we need to work with that quality. And that type of child might need to read some of those books, like even how there's room for one more, and there's how we can be a little more generous with our spirit and also feel like I'm okay. Everyone has a different personality, and it is hard, but that is what we're here. We're bringing up these kids in the best way that Hashem gave us the tools. Ultimately, They will grow up into human beings that they will be. But
Right.
our goal is just to put whatever we can. When we're seeing it, maybe have conversations, when the kids get older and you're all in your newlyweds. But I'd be curious about if you think it would be better to go with torn shoes or to make sure someone else has shoes and have a conversation. So have those theoretical conversations with them just to get them thinking and start developing their thoughts about money and that part of it.
Right. That's a fantastic tip. I'm going to put together a couple of things that you said now before I ask you one more question. So you had said that when the parents have these conversations, then they will not be stressed out about the money, and that itself filters through to the kids. I can tell you that one of the most important things in parenting is having a calm household. And the way to do that is by focusing on mindset. So when you take money, obviously, is one of the biggest stressors unless you do something to make it not, or I guess unless you have a tremendous amount of it. But nowadays, I think there's almost nobody. Somebody told me about his friends, even when they hit the 750K a year, they're still having the same stress. Their levels go up, etc. So when you take away that stressor and you're able to have a calm outlook on money, a calm association with money, and then you go and you have these conversations with your children, you're able to teach them that you're really setting them up for a healthy relationship, I think we could say, with money, b'siyata d'shmaya. So that really leads us to this question. Because that's all great and fine in the house with your children, with their respective personalities. Okay. Then they go to school and they go out in the neighborhood. And there's other people getting, everybody has whatever, right? And every kid is getting this brand name or that thing. How do we balance that real need for them to fit in versus the frivolous spending that comes along with it?
Yeah, it's a great question. How do we balance needs versus wants versus fitting in? I call it the Coneses, right? Instead of the Joneses. I first want to tap on to what you mentioned about people that have lots of money so they would be calm. Studies don't show that. Studies show that we actually, depends on the level, but we actually increase anxiety even when we have more money because it's not about how much we have, but how we feel about the money. It's not about how much. It's not about dollars. It's about how we feel. So it doesn't matter that anxiety. And again, I'm glad we all want to be the perfect parents, but we also have our own DNA, and some of us are more stressed out and more anxiety ridden. So about this fitting in, we're all, and it's interesting. I remember going last year to the park with my 13-month-old grandchild, and I showed her to climb something, and she didn't want. And then she saw a 2-year-old climbing, and suddenly she climbed in. I was like, "Oh my goodness, this is where peer pressure starts." 13 months old, and she now wants to climb it. And how could we even judge? We're innately made up to want to fit in. We want to belong. We want to. But we also need our own identity because if all we need is that fitting in, then we're always aiming for something more. The more external I need to be, the less content I am. So creating a child that feels fulfilled within himself, feels like they have a special skill set, feels like they have a special part of them that other people may not have, understand and appreciate their uniqueness will assist them to knowing how to belong or how to feel fit in, but not having to have that pressure of it. And some children do need a little extra. Maybe they struggle in school. So it's not a blanket statement for all children, like, oh, nope, all children can't. Sometimes we need to be a little more lenient, depending on what's going on for each child. Does that resonate at all?
Yeah, that a perfect answer. Um, there's nothing that's ever a blanket statement. Everything is always nuanced. Everything is always case dependent. And it's true. I mean, I've actually had this discussion with children that the more they value their own self worth, the more they recognize rather their own self worth, the less they'll need to do what everyone else is doing. But at the same time, the fact that we do need to fit in is a good thing because that's how society stays society. So that's why everything is always nuanced, and that's why everything makes sense. You can't just say no to everything, and you shouldn't also just say yes to everything. It should be a calculated. move.
And by the way, I actually asked this to a bunch of high school girls because I was curious about what their thoughts were. I get to have all the fun conversations. And really that was the overlying and overriding feeling on those girls, telling me that yeah, it is really pressurizing. And no, you don't want to be the only kid in ninth grade that doesn't have this coat, because then you're making a statement that you're not that kid. So I really heard the pressures that these girls are under and understood them. And we discussed different ways. So yeah, really balancing it. Good luck, guys, raising your kids now. I'm a little bit done from there now. But yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, do you have any last thoughts that you want to leave us with? Maybe a funny story or something that you want everyone to really think about?
Yes, at your younger years, what I would love you to remember, and I'm not teaching this, and I hope you get someone on this, the wonders of compound interest, the wonders that money, time is a money's best friend. You're young. That time is still available for you to put every time you have a little child, Mitzvah Hashem, put a little bit, $50 a month, I don't care what it is, a little bit into something that grows, whatever that is, ETF, whatever it is, just let it start growing. No matter what it will be a lot easier to have whatever money's put away for you when it's time that you need it. So it looks like your expenses are high, or maybe you're able to put away more depending on what situation you're in. Whatever it is, start with that later today. Start with thinking about that later
Wow.
today.
Okay, that's a great tip. Thank you so much for coming on. I really think that this is going to be very beneficial for so many people out there. And thank you again.
Absolutely. And if anyone has any further questions, feel free to reach out to us. Our website is www.prosper, PROSPR, no E for no excuses, .FIT for fitness. So feel free to reach out. We have some games you can take on there, some free resources.
Okay, an amazing resource. Thank you. Thank you for joining us on another episode of Parenting Not What You Thought podcast. I truly hope that this episode has been beneficial for you in your parenting. Please let me know either in the comments or by sending me an email at Baruch, that's BORUCH, at bmaparenting.com. Have a wonderful day.